Manufacturing, did we lose something on the?
Just one recording.
Oh, cool. We're going to lose, sorry, aerospace or something like that. So very much an industrial organization. In fact, they have a lot of, if you want to say, end user workers that work across the organization in manufacturing type organization. Well, their whole focus right now is changing from an industrial company to being a software industrial company. Now, if you think of that, they're trying to shift their business and change their business. Now, they use the word software industrial because that's what they want to do. In fact, they've created a complete new strategic business group with about 30,000 people in it that focuses just on that software part of the business in their development center. HCE. Not reading the acronym. Anyway, something connected enterprise. Yeah, HCE. HCE, Honeywell Connected Enterprise. And that's one of their focuses. So if you think about that, that's a complete transformation. Now, people might put the digital word on it, but the big part about it is every user at Honeywell is in a transformation process. And they're changing what they do. And so we want to look more broadly at how we can affect change and how we can bring that about. I want to talk about a few key success factors, and this says Microsoft 365 across the top, but I want to share these generally, so you can just erase it. It says Microsoft 365 across the top of there. Just think of, what are some of these key success factors that we have? Number one is stakeholders. Stakeholders are those business decision makers out there. How tied in are they? How committed are they to the solution? So next time you get ready to start that 2 or more month process, a great question to say is, who really gets it? I'm going to say, I wanted to say, who cares? My lips were going to say, who cares? But sometimes it is, who cares about this in this organization? You really want to find out who gets this in the organization that makes it worth it. Now, sometimes we're just given the command, hey, go and build this. And you're like, you want to make sure, I think sometimes in that management situation, you're like, listen, I'm willing, I'm going to do it, but I'm concerned. How does this tie back to the business? And how can I help maximize the value that it delivers the business? And to me, those are great questions to ask because that helps you understand the stakeholder. Okay, understand who is it going to make a difference for in the business? Who is bought into this change that's happening in the business? So in the case of Honeywell, for example, the person at the CEO level, Darius, Adams a check, if I'm saying his last name right. With a name like Stegelmeier, I should be better at that. But Darius, he's all about that transformation that they're making. So what we're helping them see is how our solutions help them make that transformation. How better collaboration at Honeywell makes that transformation. And so you want to tie what you're doing, what you're building, what you're creating back to those stakeholders, identify and work with them. We're going to talk about another model that will help you understand how we can enlist and recruit and get their sponsorship and work with them as well. Next is scenarios. Scenarios are really use cases. Most of us think of use cases. So a use case of what it's going to be. But what are those scenarios? I want to draw on the board, so I hope those that are online can see this a little bit. So I'll draw just a little bit on the board. But sometimes the use case kind of happens like this, and I'll just put a use case / scenario. And as Mr. Rogers knows, I'm from Idaho, so if I misspell something or mispronounce something, it's because we were raised in the same hometown. Although you learn English, I learned Idaho. Well, obviously you're speaking English. I have English as a second language for me. So a lot of times with scenarios, those scenarios may come from, if you want to say, from the business, if you want to say. Other times they might come from IT. And we may say, okay, we see this opportunity in business, and we need to get your sponsorship. Other times it might be business coming to us in IT to say, we need a solution for this type of thing. Now, sometimes it goes like this. Just a second, we'll come back to that. Sometimes business goes like this, out to, I'm going to call cloud, and they come up with, IT. And then they are discovered by IT and say, hey, how come you guys didn't come and talk to us so we could help you build out a better solution? And a lot of times it's because they don't feel we're responsive. So one of the things we want to do in helping build this stakeholders is also open some communications up so we understand what are the pain points that are out there so that we don't have these stakeholders going out and just buying whatever they want, wherever they want. That may not be secure. That may create challenges with us in what I call HSTs. Anybody know what HST stands for? Creates challenges hooking stuff together. So that's the technical term, because a lot of times we have all these disparate solutions and somebody brings something else in and it's like, okay, well, how do I communicate with that? And we're like, I don't know, we just started signing up for it and they charge us $10 a month per user. And we don't know anything about it. Well, do they do SOAP? Do they do REST? Do they do, what can we call into it? Well, we don't know. Probably none of the above, right? So anyway, it creates problems, but probably the biggest challenge with that is a lot of times the security challenges that happen out there that we're just not aware of and we can't work with. So what we hope happens is we can circumvent this, and even though they might think that out there, we can get them coming back to us with a scenario. But look for and look for those pain points. Do you have something else to add to that?
I would just emphasize pain points.
Yeah. It's usually something that's pinching or hurting. They're having a hard time making something come together, and they'll go look for a different solution, whatever that solution may be. And sometimes what they might find out here may be the right solution. And so understand they may have some very valid things, but to be in part of it so that you can minimize the risk that might happen from security issues or whatever it might be that way, but then also minimize some of the challenges that might happen just with HST hooking stuff together. And it's usually when they want to hook the stuff together and they say, hey, why can't we just get every user or organization over here in this cloud solution? They come to IT and say, how do we get the users over here? And you go, well, we probably should look at that and make sure it's secure and make sure it's doing what we need is meeting our organizational requirements and needs and stuff like that. So, so that's just a little bit on scenarios. Are people online able to see it? I hope. Maybe. I don't think okay. Yeah, I'm just not dynamic enough to. I really like the surface. The surface stuff is awesome. But we have problems with that too.
In April, you'll do the Magic Teams meeting.
You've seen the video.
It'll go through you.
Okay, he pre-announced it. I was going to save that for later.
Oh, sorry.
This is actually really cool because in the future, and I don't know how many months in the future, but I hope it's
RSN, real soon now.
Yeah, real soon now. But we are in testing mode right now with a feature that you can point the camera, and it can be just any camera you want, at the whiteboard. And it does kind of the same kind of thing we do with video blurring inside of Teams. It does the opposite of that. It kind of sees through and makes the person translucent. So you can see the whiteboard even though I'm not blocking in front of it, and we'll display the whiteboard on the other side. So some cool things coming to a theater near you soon via Microsoft Teams. It's pretty exciting with that. Okay, awareness. I'm going to do a whole section where I'm going to talk about not just awareness, but components around change management. That's important. So just kind of put a little asterisk by that, but we'll talk about more of change management and some of the other key success factors in that space. And then training really fits into that as well with some of those change management. But the biggest thing I wanted to mention right here is really trying to be in touch with these stakeholders. Some organizations have the luxury to have people who interface with different business groups in kind of business consultant roles. And I remember back in my early years of working with a local company that happens to, does anybody work for the Dominion Energy now? I want to make sure I'm not going to insult anybody. Okay, well, I guess maybe I'm going to insult them in retrospect or whatever. I just was blown away when I was first working with them because they had all these business consultants, and their job was to go work with different parts of the business and find out what they needed and bring it back to IT and try to interface that. And initially I thought, well, isn't that kind of a stupid waste of manpower and a waste of energy and things like that? And I think I know some of the other people I work with in IT kind of thought the same thing. But now I'm on the other side of that. And so I'm looking at that and saying, well, wait, they really did understand better what the business wanted, what the business was looking for. Now, most of the organizations we work for are not large enough to have that luxury of that kind of a role. So somehow we have to put that hat on and have that conversation. And maybe it's, at the water cooler, or maybe it's just passing somebody in the hall and say, hey, I know you work in project management. What kind of challenges and what kind of things are you working on? But learn from the business what's going on and try to understand from the business more of what their pain points are, what their challenges are, so that we can better bring the solutions together that are not going to be those 2 to, I'm going to call them 24-month projects that never see the light of day or never get the usage that we really want out of them. Okay. Wait for it. All right, I'm going to shift and start talking quite a bit more about change management. What I want to help people see is the difference between change management and project management. Now, while both are very important and both can be encapsulated into, if you want to say, a project effort, notice that project management almost always is more of the logical process, tools, what's going on, if you want to say, to get the project from start all the way through end, where change management focuses much, much more on people. And one of the areas that we're going to look at is an acronym called ADKAR. How many of you have ever heard of ADKAR before, outside of Eric? Eric heard of it. We talked earlier. Okay, so ADKAR is an acronym that was created and is trademarked, as you can see there, by a company called ProSci. ProSci is probably the world leading change management firm. They're based out of Colorado Springs, and they do a great job of that. But it helps us really see some different aspects. So we're going to look more into that, if you want to say, in what we can do with that. So the first thing before we dive deep into ADKAR and change management, I want to talk about something that I like to look at and rationalize things with, and that is enablement versus adoption. And under enablement, I want to call it kind of enablement, deployment, or migration. So let's say that we have an application that we've written that's specifically supposed to help do something like time tracking, and we're an engineering firm. We're going to pick on West Tech a little bit here. But it's to do time tracking towards projects. And I move it from one version of the product to a new version of the product, and we move it over one weekend. How hard is it, if you want to say, to get new users using that new product?
They're already using the old product, so it shouldn't be too bad.
So they're using the old product. Now let's just say an engineer goes for a couple weeks without entering their time in. What happens? They become an unemployed engineer. So what the difference is if we look at enablement, and I'm going to call it enablement, versus adoption, it's really not a binary thing, it's one or the other, it's kind of on a spectrum. But if I have a new time tracking system, and roughly that's how my hours get attributed to something, and this could be true in a consulting organization, and some of you have probably had to do this even on your projects that you work on. You have to track your time on it. If you migrate from one solution to another, you pretty much migrate to it, or you're going to end up in a new role in life or in a new job, right? So there's things that are more of a migration. Maybe it's a file type server thing, and your file server gets moved from being on a file server into OneDrive. Well, if your files are migrated for you and you want to still use your files, you're migrated towards OneDrive. Now, OneDrive is a good example, because if there's a migration, and I'll put with OneDrive, then that happens. I'm going to go get my files, I'm going to keep using my files, and I'm going to be a OneDrive user. But if there's no migration, and it's just OneDrive out there, and I have this going on right now with one of the customers that I work with, they enabled OneDrive, and they just kind of informally announced it a little bit, and it's just up to users to adopt it. What percentage of the users are your guests that are using it today? 2%?
Yeah.
Okay? That's actually a good guess, because with just announcing it out there, who are you going to get? You're going to get these early adopters. You're going to say, hey, this is something that's better than what I've been using. I'm going to migrate to start using OneDrive because I can share files with people externally. I can do all this other stuff and use it. And so you get somewhere, I'm going to say between, we'll put the 2%, and probably about 12 to 15%. So we'll just put somewhere in there. And that's if you just leave it out there in the wild. You're going to get these early adopters that are out there. So if you look at a workload, I'm going to call it a workload, a solution, a scenario, a solution that you put into place, you want to evaluate, is this going to be more of an enablement thing, where I'm just making it available and as such, or migration thing, or is it going to be more adoption? Because this helps you know how much you need to focus on change management. So if you think of SharePoint, you've created a solution in SharePoint that's really just to enhance collaboration. If you just put it out there, how many people are going to pick up and start using it? 2. 2. Somewhere in this range over here, right? But if it's something, it's a solution I built in SharePoint and it's got direct ties, everybody in the department has to use it, that whole department's going to be using it. And so think of that, if you want to say in your project plans and your effort, is it enablement, or I would call it enablement / migration requirement, however you want to put it, or is it adoption? So kind of evaluate that. What's that?
Call it voluntary and other.
Yeah.
Because if you move your email, they're all moved.
And that's a perfect example.
Your paycheck depends on it.
And I have some customers that are working right now on migrating from Exchange on-premises to Exchange online. And you might say, how much change management is really involved in that from an end-user perspective?
0.0%.
Hardly nothing at all. Now, in some customers, they might be using PSTs or things like that, offline storage. So there may be some awareness that we need to make them aware of. Hey, these type of things are going to go away. You're going to have a better archiving methodology, some things like that. But for the most part, when you make a switch from Exchange on-prem to Exchange online, it's kind of like, I didn't even know it happened. Okay?
You can turn PSTs off.
Right. So there may be some things you have to do as awareness. Now, I talked to a customer this morning that they turned some stuff off in SharePoint on-prem that they didn't realize was going to break one department in their entire company. And this department went livid. Okay, so once again, you have to be just a little careful and know, hey, what's going to happen over here, even if it's if you want to say an enablement workload. Okay. So let me talk for just a few minutes about AdCard. And we'll throw up on the screen a little bit of some description of this. The A in AdCard stands for awareness. Now, the biggest way to help understand the difference, or what awareness is to understand that awareness is different than desire. Because I can be fully aware of a new solution that's out there in IT, and I really don't give a damn about using it. And there's a new tool at Microsoft that's this way right now. I have an option of using the old tool or using the new tool. And I just keep going back and using the old tool because I don't want to take the time to spin up on the new tool. And there are probably people out there wondering why, well, we're seeing this many users over here. Why is this Stegelmeier dude that lives in Utah still using the old solution? And they're probably wondering that because I can still get all the data I need to into it. I know it, it's familiar, etc., and so on. So I can be very aware of it, but I just don't have the desire to support the change, to make the change, to come about that. So one of our biggest challenges isn't just awareness. So many times we can get the awareness out there in different ways, but it's to drive that desire. So to talk for just a second, awareness is things, emails, intranet, people talking about it. Your best way to drive awareness is a message coming from their leadership. So that is always the best. That's also true, the best way to drive desire. Okay, now in driving that desire, and so I'll just put a D up here, you have an option when it comes from leadership to either be in a leading way or to be in a managing way. So the leading way could be something like, Daren, we do have a new tool up there, and they are watching how many people are using it. I know you can keep using the tool to enter in all the data for your customer, the old tool, but if you would, just to help us out as an organization, would you mind moving to it? Or a managing way can be like this. And this is showing just a little bit of my preference. The managing way is, Daren, there's a new tool out there, and if in 2 weeks you're still using the other tool, I'm gonna write you up on it. Or we're gonna have another discussion about this. So to me, the reason I like to talk about that management or leadership is there's a leading way to be able to do it, help people see the vision, why we need to do it. Or the other leading way would be, Daren, the new tool's out there, I know you're used to using the old tool, but it does have a ton of benefits because there's 3 more things in there we're tracking that we're not getting data on from you because you're using the old tool. Would you mind moving up to the new tool for us? And so help me see the vision and the value of that is an important thing for leadership.
Leadership scales, management doesn't. So if you're talking about moving an organization of 1,000, 15,000, whatever, big organization, you can lead them, but you can't manage them because you're not going to get everybody between you and the end user to step up and manage, right? But if you can do what you did and say, here's what it is and the benefit that you get from it, if you can get your senior leadership to say, I have moved and here's why I've moved, then you can lead it so you can scale. But the other one I don't believe does.
And absolutely. Leading brings commitment from, I'm going to call it the heart up. And I'm waxing a little bit, if you want to say, about how we are motivated as people, but it's true. It's from the heart up. And managing comes from the amygdala, your fight and flight. If I don't do this, holy crap, I don't want to interview for a new job. And I think probably all of us that have been here have had managers or leaders that have managed instead of led. We love to work for somebody who leads. And I have a leader right now as a manager, and it's a thrill to work for him. I had in my past, several different times, managers that led with a stick instead of a carrot, right? So
But
if you think of
went
that,
off and bought a basketball team, so everything got better.
yeah.
Out for that basketball.
Huh?
Out for that basketball.
Yeah.
Let's take the example that I kind of started with in talking about what Satya's done at Microsoft. Could you lead a culture change with management styles? No. I don't believe you could. So an effective change, I believe, is really effectively brought about with leadership styles. There's ways to make change happen, but an effective change. So when I talk about a cultural change at Microsoft, Satya didn't come out and said, okay, all of you are now going to have a growth mindset. Well, when you think about a growth mindset is somebody who's always learning, who's looking for a better solution, who's trying to improve the company, who's trying to make decisions that are best for the company, not just that are best for their role. And so, he could have come out and said, you need to make better decisions. You need to make, and if you don't, we're going to put these in our review model. And in your review model, you're going to be evaluated on these things. No, what he's saying is, we want all of you to study a growth mindset. And here's what a growth mindset is. And then he starts practicing it himself. And it's kind of fun to watch because in his webcast, I get to see this in the way he thinks and the way he communicates with us in the organization. And so I get to see it embodied in his leadership. So to me, the biggest impact on desire of that leadership, and I didn't really put leadership in the whole, I just drew the line, but I get the gist of it. Peers are also important, what other people are experiencing, and I want to make sure to put that one up there. A bunch of other ways, if you want to say, it could be industry, or partners in the industry, what other people are using. So it can be all these other things that influence that desire in someone's leadership. Knowledge. Okay, knowledge is where training really comes in, and it's how to be able to actually do it. And a lot of times training will impact both knowledge and ability. So a person's knowledge and ability to be able to do something or to impact that change. And then the final thing is reinforcement. I'm going to stop for just a second, probably jump around some slides. And I want to, okay. And I want to jump to this one right here, reinforcement. So reinforcement, this is one of my favorite things to do with reinforcement, and that is to have some kind of, I call it enterprise gamification or corporate gamification. where it actually brings teams together as well. I don't like the idea of gamifying something where it's only just about the individual, other than recognition is good. Like this right here, this is one of our team's product managers, and this is a little champions badge. And so you give people badges if they're leaving things out or doing things. And in this case, you put a champions badge on, and it becomes the badge that's on your team's profile, everywhere where your picture shows up internal at Microsoft, that type of thing. So I like that. But my other preference is to have something where a team and their work group gets recognized for what they're doing. Now, this case is an example of Office 365. It also is at Honeywell. And Honeywell built out what's called a collaboration index. And it was kind of a brainstorm that I had with a few of their employees. And they just went to work and started putting it out. When they first did it, they just pumped the data out of the Office 365 Admin Center and pumped it into an Excel spreadsheet and started building out some pivot tables and things like that where they would summarize this data up and start declaring, if you want to say, how people were doing it. Then they just build it over into Power BI. And so this is a Power BI dashboard, if you will, that shows different parts of their organization and their collaborative score. It's a little hard to read on the screen right here, but I think this is 79%, 68%, 65%, 84, 82%. And this person gets a little champions or a champion cup that they won, that their department won, and got the best score on the collaboration index. To me, this is a great way to reinforce. There's a couple reasons why it's a great way to reinforce. Number one, it gets leadership engaged in the change. If leadership is seeing it and it's being measured, they can get pretty stoked about this. Now, I know there's some partners in the room here. This is something that if somebody wanted to create a little solution to drop in for customers, where it's like a collaboration index in a box. I've been trying to talk a partner into doing this for a little while, or any partner into doing it. And I can show you a whole bunch more. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see it. But I can show you more detail on it if you're interested in it. But to me, this kind of a way is a way to measure how people are doing, what's going on in the organization. So if you want to say that gamification on who is doing the best or who's adopting is a great way to build in some reinforcement. Anytime you can get leadership to come down and recognize people for the change they're making and how they're adopting things, what they're doing, that is a huge kudo and a huge plus to be able to pull that together. So big with that.
I've been struggling for 4 years to metric how we are doing with our adoption, because I don't think there's any one number that says here's how we're doing with adoption. So I'm looking at your bar graph, and I'm extraordinarily curious about what drives those numbers. I know you can't get specific, but give us an idea.
Well, I can tell you it's quite a bit. There's a whole webcast on this if you want to look at it.
Okay.
If you go to aka.ms/collab index.
And you're going to go through and share that with everybody, right?
I just did, yes. I can't have the fact, but you'll have to make sure and remind me. aka.ms/collab index. That will first link you to my LinkedIn article I wrote on the webcast I did with Honeywell on it. And then there's a link directly to the webcast that we did, which, by the way, is in live events, which is so slick. Anytime you're trying to do something that's broadcast out to people, live events is really...
So that collab event is going to have the metrics that make up your team's bar there?
Well, it'll just tell you more about how we created it and all the background with it. I can walk you through a little bit of this right now. These bars are made up of Teams, Yammer, and OneDrive.
Right.
And this is based on the number of users that used it that week. So if a user used the Teams that week, they got a point. And so this is a percentage of the number of users that have used it that week. So they just did some crunching on this. Now, we have a tool that's a Power BI app that you can plug into Office 365 that does some reporting. And I think we call it the adoption pack. It's like the Office 365 adoption pack.
You play with it.
You play with it. Okay, let me tell you the shortcoming of it. The shortcoming of it is it doesn't do this right here. In other words, week 20, week 21, week 22, it doesn't keep your historical data.
Well, the other shortcoming is it'll tell me how many terabytes of storage I have. It'll tell me how many files I have. It'll tell me how many users I have syncing, but it won't compare
the terabytes I have stored in OneDrive as compared to the terabytes I have stored on local hard drive because the jackasses won't put it in OneDrive. That, to me, that's adoption, is getting it from this pool here to that pool there, and it doesn't tell me that.
Yeah, there's some data that's going to be impossible to pull, like the hard drive data, and even you, I mean, with the right management tools, you can kind of tell some of that stuff.
But even if I can compare the number of messages that get sent from person A to person B in the company via email, as opposed to outside the company, then I can say, okay, this percentage of Teamsable communication didn't happen in Teams. And so there's some stuff that would be helpful to me that's not there.
Yeah, that is a good question. If you get that granular, even down to messages, for example, to be able to measure that kind of, I believe that on Exchange Online you can get pretty granular on that, but I'm not sure if you'd be able to, you'd probably have to mine the data out. So that's roughly what they do. They run a script each week that takes the data out, pounds the data into a Power BI, and then they pounded it into a cube and then leveraging it into this, and build this out. So, and on that webcast, a guy named Mike Gopkin that's done most of the Power BI work on the back end. The other guy is no longer with Honeywell. In fact, I had to check where he's at now, but nice enough guy as well. But that's my favorite way is to kind of measure the data, see what actually is happening. Give some good data to management, so management can say, hey, we're increasing in what we're doing, and that impact is being seen out there. Okay, so we got around the ADPAR model, and rather than jump back to the slides, I'm going to blank that for just a second. And we got to reinforcement. I want to talk about how to bring, if you want to say that, those together for just a second here. And this little chart right here is from a company local in Utah. I don't think their name's anywhere on there, so I think it's kind of safe with us or whatever. But this is a chart that when I started working with them, they didn't have anybody doing project management. And the first thing I want to make sure everybody knows here, I am not a project manager. In fact, I'm just not exacting enough to keep things on a timeline all the time with that. So I started helping them with project management, and I built out an Excel spreadsheet to use because I didn't want to jump into project and get too complicated with it. I probably should have just jumped into project. But one of the people there changed roles and became the project manager for this overall effort and to focus on this effort, and took some time to just build this out. And I really like what they did here is because you see both the project, the typical, I'm going to call them traditional project things that you would see in there, like the technical stuff. Test the Skype room systems and what meant underneath that. Test them to make sure they work with Microsoft Teams. Prepare the SCCM package and the MDM package for rollout of the Teams client. Deploy all the Skype room systems. Make sure they're up and going. And so you see the technical stuff mixed in with also the change management things, like send the first communication to the company, send the second communication to the company, send the envisioning session invites, which were roughly envisioning sessions bringing different key groups together to help them see the value of Microsoft Teams in their environment. And so bring together that overall, I'm going to call it change management plan, the communication plan, and your technical plan so you can see that. And you can see how they also just color-coded it based on what was going on in the events that were happening up there in their environment. So to me, this is a great example of how to bring it together and make sure you're paying attention to that user and that change management so that you're going to get the maximum benefit out of your organization or out of your effort with that. Okay, another best practice, and this best practice helps overcome, I'm going to get back to this one. I want to go to this one first. Okay, earlier when we were joking around about our 2-month to lifetime project that never gets used, and we talked about 2% to 10%, roughly in a product, or in an adoption, if you want to say, this is a typical life cycle of what you'll see. You're going to have early adopters that just jump in and start using it. In fact, they're going to walk by IT and somehow magically hear, and we were joking around earlier here at West Tech, they're going to hear, what's the dude's name that makes the dashboards? Roland. They're going to hear that Roland's making a new dashboard, and they're going to say, Roland, you're making a new dashboard. Can I see it? Can I use it? How soon can I look at it? And so they're going to be those early adopters that are just so excited to see everything early. Then it's going to go to a leadership kind of FYI. Hey, we've created a new dashboard, and they're going to announce it a little bit. And when I say a little bit, it's probably not going to be broad. It's just going to be, hey, this is available. Maybe it's just a post on the company intranet site. And you'll automatically pick up another, if you want to say 10%. So you get somewhere maybe 13%, 14, 15% of the users. And that's this early adoption. And you've seen in the past probably the hype cycle. You have these early adopters, and then there's this chasm that happens between there and Main Street. And that chasm is really plotted out across time. It's not that you lose those early adopters in this chasm. It's just that the rate of adoption slows down. So you need this help to add the next 25% of the users to get to where something becomes mainstream. And it's this part right here that's the hardest to do in adoption. What do you do to get across it? And this is part that I didn't really see until an effort that we're making right now with Honeywell is how you actually fuel this next part. What you do to fuel this next part is you go to these early adopters, or better yet, you just listen while the early adopters are working with their stuff. And you learn the data and the stories that they're telling about what they're experiencing. So you find the success stories. And some people might say, man, this new dashboard, it's so nice because I really know what my customers are doing within 2 days of when it happens. Maybe you have a 2-day data lag or whatever. So you find the stories and the value that that's bringing to the business, and then you use that to help you get across and communicate out to this broader audience, and you drive a broader awareness campaign that helps them see. And what does that do? As they see the vision of what it can do, it drives desire, and then it's going to help drive your usage. So you leverage those early adopter stories. I don't want to say leverage the early adopters. You find the data and stories that they are coming up with, and you use that to influence these others. That data and that story is going to help you get that next level of leadership and sponsorship. Now, no offense to a CIO, but when the CIO comes out and says, hey, we've got a new dashboard, you guys are going to love it, what do almost every user in the organization do? Click, turn off, right? But if I am, if you want to say, in the sales organization, and I have the VP of sales come out and say, hey, there's a new dashboard, and I think you guys are going to love it. Here's a quick demo of it on a team call. What's that going to do if he takes that story, hey, here's how our early adopters are using it. In fact, what if the VP turns it over to an early adopter and say, hey, look what Julie's doing in her department with it over here, and Julie gets up and does a quick demo of it. Boom, boom, boom. Here's the value that I saw from it, and Julie is, if you want to say, a sales manager or a sales executive in this department over here. That helps us cross that chasm.
Yeah, here in the past I've tried something like this where you take those users who were, and you make evangelists out.
Yep.
And you basically kind of put them on the track to sell the product.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Usually these people are passionate enough about change that they're passionate about the solution. They might say, well, there's 3 more things it needs. Like Teams needs the whiteboard feature that we were just talking about. I might say that, it's like, hey, once it gets this, it's going to be great. But they're going to be passionate about it, and that excitement and passion that they have about it is going to help cross this chasm right here. This leadership sponsorship evolves as you go. Now, it's great if the first person that wanted it is the CEO of the organization, because then you've got some solid sponsorship to help drive this across it. But when it's not, if they're just like, yeah, we want to transform the organization and we think we need to help our collaboration tools, but I'm not going to make a video on it, that's fine. We go build that and we get leadership and sponsorship. Maybe this is somebody in the PMO. Maybe this is also somebody in real estate. And so we get a couple of other key leaders driving this across to help us through this chasm. And then whatever we're doing becomes part of the culture. If I say to you right now, go Google it, what do you think of doing? Yeah, I know it's a Microsoft guy telling me to Google it. And yes,
Google that on me.
That was risky for my career. Laughingly, in the Steve Ballmer era, people would have probably 10 or that, and maybe said, well, I'm going to tell you to Bing it because I don't want to get in trouble, But now it's like, yeah, you can use it. When things become a verb in your organization, it's made a cultural change. So your goal is to get things to become a verb. So if the new, what was Roland creating again?
The dashboard.
The dashboard. If the new dashboard, let's call it Power Dash. If Power Dash, hey, when people start talking at the water cooler, to say, have you checked out Power Dash? And because people are trying to say, and I'm just making up a name for it. But when whatever you've created becomes just cultural speak across the organization, you're into that mainstream. So you want to get that leadership sponsorship. And then it grows from, if you want to say those area VPs or directors to getting CXO level, and I'm going to call it non-CIO level, but CXO outside of IT sponsorship, it drives across that adoption curve. So that is, if you want to say to me, that secret sauce that many times, even in the ProSci model, they don't talk about. How do we get these data from the early adopters, the stories from the early adopters? So when you have that early adopter that comes up and says, hey, I really love this, and this, and then right after that, they're going to say, but can you fix this, and this? Obviously, your story is not going to have the last three things. You're going to take that back to your the biggest room you have in your house, which is the room for improvement. Okay, you take that back to the room for improvement now. Bad joke, blah, blah, blah. You take that back when you take the story that they have, and that's the story that you take out to the rest of the organization. Whether it's in an intranet post, and maybe even turn to them and say, hey, are you willing to make a video of this? And they say, yeah. Can I video it right now? Tell me those first 5 things. And just grab your phone and video it, and then that's your post that you post up to your intranet site to say, hey, here's the new solution, and here's what it did for Michelle over in sales, or whatever department it might be. Don't make it too complicated. Make it pretty simple. And you can post that to a team site. We'd love it if you did that too. But you post it to wherever to help drive that awareness and drive that desire for other people to be able to do it. So coming to that next slide that I went past to get back to that, what are some of those other best practices for early adopters? Those early adopters, you just gotta love them. They're your best friends out there. Love your early adopters. Create a team of them. They can be your coach on what to improve in the future. They can be your team to coach on what to make to help the business in the future. So these early adopters, it's great to create a group for them. Microsoft Teams group is a great example. One of my customers created one called the Teams Influencers, and you can see their different departments that they have influencers that are in there from. And then they monitor that. They have people that are in the project that come in and answer their questions and say, oh, you're trying to do this? Here's how you do it. In fact, I've got an appointment with one of these groups. It's the communications people. They'll build out their schedule. Then I'm working with a partner on, I think it's on Wednesday afternoon. Yeah. No, Thursday afternoon. Thursday afternoon that we're working with them. So you get to monitor that. And then the other thing you can do is you can put office hours where these early adopters can come in and ask, and you might maintain those office hours for the other people as well, where people can ask you questions. And especially if you're in a virtual environment, you can make that a virtual meeting where people can just connect in anytime and say, hey, we're here to answer your questions. And it's your virtual beat up the IT dudes and dudettes session or whatever you want to call it. But a lot of times we at Microsoft just call those office hours to help with that process of using it. Anyway, once again, always look for those success stories to help cross that adoption chasm and get the momentum to be able to cross that adoption chasm. Okay, how late am I supposed to go anyway?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. It ain't that good, I know that. Okay, I just want to see a couple other things. This is a Teams example, but what you do if you go to Teams only mode is you move it from an adoption effort over into an enablement effort. So anytime you can make something an enablement effort, that makes it easier for people to be able to adopt it. Now, the other thing you can do is make it more and more discoverable. So, for example, with Teams, you can have Teams, when you deploy it, be an auto start, so that as it opens up, people find it right then, and it's right in front of them. There's a tutorial that it walks through, and I hope most of you walk through the tutorial of Teams. It does pretty good job at introducing you to teams in a rudimentary way. So making things discoverable is always helpful. If I were creating a new dashboard and it were for sales, I would try to somehow surface it for every salesperson. Maybe there's a way to make that part of the intranet site where there's a little frame in the intranet site that for salespeople it would automatically come up as a dashboard for the salespeople. So try to make it discoverable, which removes a lot of your adoption barriers. Because if people don't know where to go to find it, right then just as quick as thinking, oh, where do I find that? A lot of times they're going to say, oh, I'm going to do it later. And then they won't do it. So as much as you can make things discoverable is a very huge help for adoption as well as that. You can make some of that awareness, I'm going to call it mandatory. I'm not as big of a fan of this. I put this in here because this to me is a little bit of that management. Hey, you've got required training you have to do. I know that most organizations are going to have this kind of stuff where the required training you need to do, and that's just to be in compliance with maybe government contracts you have or other things that you want to do just to be compliant with that. So, but you can have training be required, and that's another kind of best practice with that. Okay, this is a shameless plug for our live events, and specifically our live events in Yammer. But the work that we've done in live events is quite impressive. If you have the desire to go out to a meeting that has more than 50 people, Teams meetings do great, and they'll scale even much beyond that. But if you're trying to go out to an audience, and in fact I want to work with a SharePoint user group, and let's upgrade you into live events here. We got to figure out who to host it with or what tenant to host it on. But so we should be able to figure that out and do it. But it's pretty slick because you can have a producer that then says, okay, it's this person's turn to talk. It's this person's turn to talk. You can have people from around the globe producing and displaying onto the screen to do a webcast. Pretty slick event or event management, and it's really simple. The nice part about it is when you get done, if you recorded it, the recording just shows up automatically in the chat session for the event as well. So you don't have to go in and manage the recording, post it up to a new site or anything like that. So give that a whirl. On the topic of, and so there's kind of multiple things on this slide. One is a plug for live events, but another thing for it is I think a real key to organizational transformation is a way for the executives to communicate to the organization as a whole on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be once a month. I think once a quarter is plenty. But communicating the organization once a quarter is big to really be able to make transformation, to make changes, to help people get the passion and the drive for what's happening in the organization. So I would recommend, I'm going to give these slides to you guys how we have to do it, so let's figure that out afterwards so you can leverage them and stuff like that. But I would recommend doing this in every organization. They're great at Microsoft. I only attend probably half of them because I'm booked for something else. But it's great because you get a pulse for what's going on in the broader organization. You understand better how your role in the organization ties back to the broader organization and to the goal. So it just brings a cohesiveness across the organization, and it enables transformation that simply wouldn't happen any other way. So I'm trying to get every one of my customers to do this, and I think it benefits every organization. And obviously in this, you can highlight other things that help manage change. It might be and by the way, there's a new dashboard, or by the way, there's a new collaboration tool, whatever it might be. Okay, Eric, what am I forgetting that I covered on the whiteboard earlier? I think I covered most everything on it. Okay, I did want to mention this. This Yammer thread isn't going to work for you. Ignore the thread on this, but know that there is a new tool coming out called Custom Learning for Office. And I'm not supposed to announce it today, but I tell everybody I'm too transparent, and I haven't been fired yet, so we'll see how it is. Expect an announcement within the next couple weeks. 10 days ago, they said it would be within the week, but it hasn't happened yet. And maybe they're going to hold off. When's the SharePoint conference? That's not till April. The SharePoint conference in Vegas is April.
May 21st.
In May, yeah.
That's probably what they'll
Okay, anyway, there's a tool coming, and roughly what this is going to be is it's a SharePoint solution for being able to host training. It's going to host all Microsoft training. You can post your own training to it. You can make custom training tracks for people to be able to go down through, and it's all hosted on a SharePoint site. If you just go search for it, there's some stuff on the web right now, right on the Microsoft support site right now. But I've been told that that's the pre-release solution, and they want to hold off until they make the announcement for you to
They
browse.
started talking about it.
What's that?
They started talking about it, like on the IntraZone podcast and other places.
Yeah. So just know that
It's
within
not
the
a
next,
huge secret.
yeah, within the next, yes, it's leaked out. So here you go. I'm not going to lose my belt. That's great. Okay. That being said, I'm going to blank the screen so we can talk about questions. There's a blank up there. Oh, there it goes. Cool.
Well, the only question we really had on mine was, will your slides be available? So yes, we will
Yeah.
work to make those available. And we should, cross your fingers, have a recording as well.
I think we started the recording a snitch late.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have thought of that. Cool. Usually go how late?
Officially till 6, but we want to have a few minutes if anybody has any questions. Generally, but first for Daren specifically.
Yeah. And you can stump, I mean, if you want to stump me really fast, just ask technical questions because I'm not, I used to be technical and I just am not as technical as I used to be, so.
So what are the top blockers you encounter for people, increasing their adoption, increasing whatever? What are the common things you run into? How do we combat those?
Lack of executive sponsorship.
Well, sometimes it is. It's, a lot of times it's getting, I'm going to say prioritization of the project. And then also, and usually the problem with prioritization of the project is seeing the value of the project and seeing the value of the project at executive levels. I think especially around teams. And so a lot of what I focus on is around teams because typically with a lot of our other workloads in Office 365, it's more of a migration. And then there's usually some technical blockers that get in the way there. So we'll talk about a little bit of that in a second. But around teams, it's really seeing the value that collaboration really unlocks. And the best way to really open the eyes up to that is there's two paths that are really great there. And I wish I had actually thought of these in my slides earlier. One of them is actually to the executive administrator, or the executive administrator. So the administrative professional. So if you want the executive to know the value of teams, get all of the executive administrators that work with the C-suite to use Teams, and they will get the fashion. Okay, that is my number one, I'm going to call it secret. It's not a secret weapon anymore because I just told you about it. But that is the best way in, because if you were to go in and say, I want to show, to the CEO, I want to show you a great collaboration tool. You're like, we're trying to figure out how to keep the board of directors happy today. I don't have time for that, right? It's going to be some other, there's not really that passion for it. But if you go to the executive admin and say, listen, we're having a little training session for you and all the rest of the executive admins next Wednesday, and we're going to bring in lunch for you, and you bring in a nice salad or something like that, and you help them see Teams and how they can use it and what it can do for them, they're going to be thrilled by it. They're going to be thrilled by it. So to me, that's a great way. You need to get that vision to the higher level executives. So that's a great way to do it. Remember, Executive Administrators Week is the 22nd through the 26th of April. So there you go. You can do it that week. So that's Teams. To me, Teams to get executive sponsorship is big with that. If you think of the challenge we've had for years and years and years with SharePoint and getting people to leverage SharePoint, that's the exact same challenge we have with Teams. Because it hasn't been a critical, we got to have it, it's going to, it has to be today on the environment. Where email is like, oh, if email is not working, the business isn't working, right? But SharePoint just hasn't had that same level of, we got to have it. So Teams is, if you want to say, has that same kind of thing. So coming back to workloads, if you look at different workloads, Exchange Online is usually some kind of a technical blocker that has to do many times with governance. And when you talk about governance, that includes everything from security to legal retention, all those kinds of things. So usually with an Exchange Online, that's the type of challenge. With Skype for Business Online, the biggest challenge there has been when people have existing enterprise voice commitments to what they're doing for voice on-prem that keeps them from moving to the cloud. So maybe they have a Skype for Business infrastructure that's got all their integrations for enterprise voice, and that tends to be a boat anchor. That can also be a boat anchor, and I call it a blocker or a boat anchor. It can be a blocker for getting people to Teams as well, because they'll say, well, we're using enterprise voice in Skype on-prem today, and so we have this great infrastructure we built out. We haven't fully depreciated the investment that we've made out in the organization, so we're not ready to move it yet. How do we keep people from getting confused between Teams and Skype for Business? And I think that a lot of times there's too much emphasis on that. Oh, I'm going to get confused whether I should use Skype or whether I should use Teams. Users adapt quicker than I think a lot of times we in IT tend to think that they do. So, but anyway, that can be a little bit of a blocker both for Skype for Business Online as well as for Teams, because it's like, what about the confusion between when do I use each one of these? Okay, so
Sorry, Daren.
very good.
Confusion, though, is a key element of what we're dealing with in trying to help people with migration. You talk about getting the admin assistants, on board. Well, that's great, but if the CIO and every millennial I'm dealing with is totally in love with Google because the G Suite is simple and easy and there's one way to do things, and then I come to them with this wonderful Office 365 suite where there's 7 different ways to do things, the confusion is a serious hurdle to
Do I use Yammer? Do I use Teams? Do I use a team site? What do I use?
Right.
Yeah.
Do I just go into one
So-
and share a document? All those things. Yeah.
So even though I had some shameless plugs for Yammer up here, for the most part, in an organization that doesn't have over, I'm going to say, 5,000 users, I would not kick off a new Yammer environment unless you already had one going. So kind of take Yammer off the table unless you have a large organization. Then there's some great benefits with it, with town halls and chats with town halls and just the broader enterprise knowledge sharing that is available in Yammer. So that's a plus on large organizations. So if you're under 5,000, I'm just going to say, hey, fire away with Teams and have a broad team that includes the whole company, and let that be, I'm going to call it your quote unquote Yammer, where people can talk about and share what they want to. So that kind of removes, if you want to say, that uncertainty. Definitely the uncertainty right now between Skype for Business Online and Teams, especially if people already have it on their desktops and use it, there's a little bit of a confusion. Is, oh, should I send them a chat in Skype or should I send them a chat in Teams? And that is, I'm going to call it some of the gap that we are struggling with and that struggle to help organizations with. So to me, that's the biggest point of confusion with the tool set today. I wish I could say there was a real good silver bullet with it. A lot of it is just helping people see and understand the value of Teams, and as they use Teams, they'll migrate to there and they'll start using it more and more and more. We are in theory, okay, I haven't seen it, so it's not close enough to a roadmap to say expect it coming soon. We're in theory supposed to make it so that it'll be seamless in doing chats across between Skype for Business and Teams, but I think there's enough technical debt there that it's hard to make that a reliable solution. And so I don't know that it'll ever see the light of day. So just don't count on that, but that may happen in the future. In an organization, if you've got Skype for Business and you're a nimble enough organization that you can make the move to Teams faster, I would try to just accelerate that and make the move to Teams and get people over using Teams. The biggest thing that I'm going to say is the one tool, if people are comparing G Suite to this, it is Teams. Teams is the one tool. And so if I were going in to talk to somebody that said, oh, well, we're a G Suite user, we go here for this, we go here for this, we go here for this, for everything in G Suite. If I was just going to talk to them, I'd say, well, number one, you've got value there. Maybe that's a great solution. Let me show you what you can do in Teams. And I would just show them everything that you can do in Teams and try to get a good broad exposure to Teams. And I think that once they see everything that's happening there, and then also understand a little bit of our direction, that they'll say, yeah, I want to be there. I've only used, I'm going to say, the G Suite side of things, a little bit with my kids in school, and also just a little bit of Hangouts. And I know that for an enterprise solution, it's definitely going to be, not only in the dust already, but going to be left in the dust just feature-wise and everything you want. Like even this voice transcription or the whiteboard thing that we were just talking about, stuff like that, background blurring and video. This stuff is going to, if you look at this, in fact, if you want to see kind of a future of collaboration, search on YouTube for Microsoft Future of Collaboration, and there's a healthcare video that walks through a kind of future vision of that. It's pretty exciting where it's going with that. So that gives you just a flavor of some of the stuff that I think we're going to see, 5, 10 years down the road, and that's where it gets way exciting.
So Teams, so we've got like 2,500 AD users.
Mm-hmm.
We've had about 25% go to Skype for Business for years.
Uh-huh.
We're in the process of trying to move everybody to Teams. The challenge that we have is we're not a very tech savvy company, but also so a lot of the hardware they're on is 4 or 5 years old. You got like 4 gigs of RAM, you got old machines, and we're getting tons of complaints about, if I have Teams open, I can't do my other work, my computer bogs down. Have you seen that with customers? It's just the client itself just hogs all the memory resources on the machine.
So what I have understood about Teams is it's a Chromium app, if I understand the technology correctly. And so it will use what's available, and it will appear that it's being the biggest hog out there. But it's supposed to be good at balancing and managing that. Now, that being said, if it's not, I know we continue to tune it up. One of the things that I've used in the past is because I collaborate with my customers, I get to switch tenants. And it used to be that when you'd switch tenants between like working with Honeywell and working on the Microsoft tenant to go collaborate, it would used to take more time. And that now is down to maybe 5, 6 seconds, which to me, that kind of stuff is going to continue to improve. Because of how we built the application, I think we're going to find that it's going to be very, very flexible in what it does. I mean, you can use it on Chrome, you can use it on across the board. You don't have to necessarily have the client. So it might be interesting to see, hey, is there a way, if I use it inside of Chrome, is it better than that? Now, today, Chrome doesn't do video and calls, but that's coming probably within the next month.
That's kind of what we've kind of leaned towards, is if we have issues, just use the web client.
Yeah.
And that's not ideal always.
No, it's not.
Like I said, especially because just how old we are, we're still a bunch of Win 7 machines and IE 11 as the default browser.
Yeah.
So it causes all kinds of other issues for us. So.
Yeah.
Just different hurdles that we're trying to overcome.
Yeah, I don't have a really solid answer from that other than we continue to tune Teams, and I think it'll get more and more sleek and more beta. Sorry, that's probably trademarked by our Hawaiian restaurant friends. But I think it'll continue to improve that way.
I'm a believer. I mean, it's ingrained into what I do every day. But
yeah,
I'm a geek too, so it's hard to get non-geeks to do that. But.
Well, just some of the things. If you think of what people also use, I think they're probably used to Outlook being a resource hog.
Yeah.
And no offense, I'm kind of like I'm shooting the company here or whatever. Outlook's a resource hog as well. As I look at that, a lot of what you do at Outlook today is going to be inside of Teams. I wouldn't be surprised if there becomes an app that's just your email little tab inside of Teams as well, and then a lot of this, and then you can take it and say, oh, convert this email into a chat, and you can just be in a chat right away instead of an email message. So I don't know on some of that. I'm totally guessing on that, so don't say Microsoft pre-announcing something, but the calendaring or the meetings part of Teams right now is pretty limited because you only go 2 weeks in the future and 2 weeks in the past. So that's going to all get, if you want to say that the next level of the calendaring app is going to give you full calendaring capability, which to me is the next step to say, oh, well, why do I need Outlook at this point? And then at that point, it's really, I just need something to tell me when there's an email message that I can address or that's needing attention or something like that, so. Anyway, I'm up here chatting teams. It definitely still has some distance to go, but when I look at it, especially where it's come from, everything that we have added, what we've got right now, it's pretty solid, but. Other questions? So let's thank our sponsors, Intex, right? Intex, sorry, and for their pizza, and let's thank again West Tech for the building and keeping the heat on this time of night. I mean,
Does anyone else have any other questions that maybe aren't directed toward Daren? He does.
I'm full of them.
I'm just gonna come up here and see the chats.
I'm still interested in this data gateway stuff. Again, still on-prem, and trying to push some folks in the organization to want to use Flow and Power Apps and.
It's
Using the data gateway.
data gateway or whatever you're gonna use, it's just, it's called, it's an adoption, so it's exactly what.
So last month you were talking about, discovering it. Anything changed in the month?
No, I've pushed all the links I could find about understanding gateways, how to install them, where to download it, everything you needed to do in the environment, and I sent that to our server. Admin, easy to too busy or uninterested one of the two.
Right.
They're both. So, could be.
So, dirty secret. There is a user mode version of the gateway. It's the same installer. It's just a choice when you're installing it. If you wanted to play around with it on your laptop, you can do that.
Not that
That doesn't
would
mean-
the firewall or poke a hole. in the
Correct. That
firewall.
doesn't make admins very happy. So you need to consider carefully,
I'm talking personal mode.
correct, the repercussions of doing this.
I don't think it will give me I saw that, but.
For testing
For
purposes.
testing purposes,
Yeah.
it's not a bad way to go. Do not take it to production.
That should be on the website.
Well, I got another database admin who has his own server with SharePoint installed, separate font.
Mhm.
And he has expressed possibly somebody just allowing me to, or helping me install there and then run it there.
Sure.
To then convince the server admin that it's safe. Now I know what the problem is.
We've done a pilot.
Different.
We've gone from personal mode to connected to enterprise data to let's do it right.
What I can't figure out right now, maybe you guys can help me figure this out, is there any additional costs to downloading and installing the gateway?
No, there is no additional charge for the gateway. Some of the things you would connect to it
Yeah.
might have a cost. So for example, Power BI, Flow, Power Apps, you gotta make sure you're properly licensed with those.
So we got all the licenses, and I think we're using E3 licenses.
So you're
We're
all
it on
Power BI is
all
part of
those.
E5.
Well, Power BI free has a free tier, but the Pro, you either need to get it from E5 or.
We have some Power BI
or-
guys that they would be the only ones that use that anyway, so, but.
But it's just those different application families, you need to make sure you have license. So the gateway itself doesn't.
What's your license?
Lawyer included unless you need a program.
Are you?
Pre-need connectors you have to add on.
That's true.
So, I'll give you the info. So,
And I don't know
for
that
E3,
connector.
we use
More like.
an Azure partner here in town called Lightstream. And they work with our infrastructure guys and guided them on how to get our gateway set up. And Microsoft paid them to use Microsoft. Somehow they got money from Microsoft. And you have to be enterprise licensing, but if you don't like your set.
So
And so they're so you reach out to them. Because that's what we did. I had an infrastructure group that's like, oh, we don't even know what to do. And so we got people to advise. They won't come in and physically do all of it, but they'll work side by side. You might be selling them.
Thanks.
All right, other questions? Otherwise, we can hang out for a few minutes, eat some more pizza, enjoy your time. Let's give Daren a hand too.
question.
Here we go, question.
Alright, so I'm trying to connect to the Microsoft Graphical Flow, but I keep getting an authentication error, even though I've given the secret, the client secret, the app ID, all that stuff. Has anybody experienced, anybody have any suggestions on what can, or is it just too,
So it's dark, like you've had it working and then it stopped, or it
No, it's
stops
just-
working like every week, or?
that's never really, it's always one kind of post. Yeah. Or it's to the Microsoft Graph. There's a post column that just gives you a generic
I know
error.
Karen's all in here, the difference.
And it's,
I don't know. Is it an admin on mobile admin? I'm the only one calling.
the only thing I've seen there, and I don't have a ton of experience with it, the thing I've seen with posting to the graph is even though you might be using your credential, you still have to go in, I'm trying to remember where it is, somewhere in like the Azure portal, where you can check some boxes to say, hey, I'm going to allow read permission, I'm going to allow write permission, I'm going to allow whatever. Like even if you're a mobile app, that's still not that other box.
Yeah, it is. You have to go through the
Right, get your app token and whatever else, right?
Yeah. I've done all these. Best for all.
Let me send you an email.
Good to see you.
So, material from the 365 site. I walked through a couple of them and they were touchy. Like it would sometimes work and sometimes not, but generally they're great.
I was gonna say.